The American Revolution, today on The Miss Meyer Show. Okay, so we're going to continue talking about the American Revolution. Now, the American Revolution is like this big thing that a lot of people think that they know everything about. But there's really some interesting stuff that went on with the American Revolution that I didn't even know about until I started researching it for myself. So I'm going to give you a little bit of that cool information along with the basic facts that you need to know, especially when you're taking this quiz. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the beginning of the revolution and some things that kind of started it. Now, the first thing that we are going to talk about is the most famous thing that, you probably ever heard of, and that is the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. Now, Paul Revere was a member of the Sons of Liberty. Now, what the Sons of Liberty were is that these were the guys who were really angry with King George and Great Britain and wanted to get back at them, fight, revolution kind of. So Paul Revere was one of these guys. Well, what happened was Paul Revere was stationed and watching out and, to the harbors, watching in the water, all watching to see if the British were going to roll up in their ships. Because Britain, their big main military thing was the Navy. That was the big deal, was the British Navy. So Paul Revere was sitting there and watching, and he was out there watching, and as the ships came in, Paul Revere rode his horse to to warn the Americans in Massachusetts, all of that kind of stuff, that the British were coming. And that famous line that we hear them say, "The British are coming, the British are coming," that was Paul Revere. That was this guy. Well, what this did, it alerted the Americans that the British were coming to on American shore, really the start of the revolution. And we say that the Paul Revere's ride was the start of the American Revolutionary War. And it was Paul Revere who warned them. Later on during the war, there was actually a teenage girl, and she went and warned people that British were coming as well at a different port. But the one that you need to know for this test is just Paul Revere. But there were other people. He wasn't the only one who warned the British. He's just the one that gets the most notoriety. Okay, so the first battles that were fought in the American Revolution were the battles at Lexington and Concord. Now, Lexington and Concord were in Massachusetts as well. Now, what happened there was the American forces were, throughout Massachusetts and America. The important thing to remember was that these American forces were not some trained military with military things. I mean, yeah, they had guns and such, and you had a couple of military, but we were not even an official country, so we didn't have like your basic military. So most of the men who fought for America were militia, really. A lot of them did fight in the French and Indian War, but they were not really, high-ranking soldiers. You had a couple, like George Washington, who was, they made a general, but the majority of these people were farmers who lived, trying to make their living with crops and things like that. They did not have a regulated army, and you will see in the future, when we talk about it in a little while, how that really kind of hurt them. And it wasn't until they were properly trained that they were not doing very well in this war. In fact, George Washington, because he married Martha by this time he was never really over Sally Fairfax, but he was over her enough to marry someone else. So, and they really liked each other in the end, Martha and George. So he was writing Martha letters saying, "When we lose this war," not if we lose this war, it is when we lose this war. So George Washington didn't even really have a ton of faith in winning the Revolutionary War because we were not well supplied. We did not have the materials, we did not have the ships, the guns, the food, the ammunition, the manpower. We didn't have any of that. And to make matters worse, a big chunk of the colonial people that were living in the colonies at that time were sympathetic to Great Britain. They were loyalists. Not everyone was a patriot or, wanting to revolutionize and break away from England. A lot of people wanted to remain loyal to the king. And that caused a problem because now they didn't even have all the men to fight on their side. So we didn't even have it. We did not have enough people. So when you put it all together, it's kind of extraordinary that we won the Revolutionary War at all. But we're going to talk about how we won that with the help of our friends. Well, Lexington and Concord, like I said, were in Massachusetts. And America at this time was being led by a militia captain named John Parker. Now, Parker was trying to get these troops in shape, trying to get them to be like a centralized unit. It was not an easy task, and it wasn't something that he was able to do. And so what happened at Lexington and Concord were that these were the first real battles, I guess you can say, of the American Revolution. The Americans were in Lexington, training and all that kind of stuff. And they had supplies in Concord, Massachusetts. They had ammunition and guns and such things like that. Well, they ran on the British. They ran into the British. And when they ran into the British, they were just coming. Like the British were coming one way, the Americans were coming another, and they ran into each other at Concord, Massachusetts. The British were ordered to go there to Concord to confiscate the materials that the Americans had. So the British troops were there, the Americans were there. It was like, wow, like a fight. But they didn't expect each other to be there. We ended up winning this battle, the battle at Concord. It was just a big, it was our first major victory. Even though a lot of people did not die during this battle, it wasn't this huge battle. It was a victory for America. And what it did was it really rallied up people, other Americans to say, hey, maybe we should join this cause. Because like I just said, a lot of people were loyal to Great Britain. And they did not think that it was a very wise decision to break away and to revolutionize the colonies. So this battle, even though it was kind of a small little skirmish, really got people, the colonists who were on the fence and saying, maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't. They were finally saying, I think we need to join up. You started to get a lot more people that were sympathetic to the revolutionary cause. The Battle of Bunker Hill took place about June 17th, 1775, and it was in Charleston, Massachusetts. Remember, Boston, this is before Washington, D.C. was like the big center. Boston and Philadelphia were your two major centers in the colonies, in the, revolutionary times of America. So most of these battles took place in those kind of areas. Well, this was a victory, eventually Bunker Hill was a victory for the British. However, the British lost more people than the colonists did. And the reason we call it the Battle of Bunker Hill was because it was on a hill, and the hill was called Bunker Hill. And just like any hill, let's see if I can... Okay, so I'm going to use my little army men for this. This is my army men. And we'll say that the green men are Britain, and the gray men are America. Okay, so here's our little Americans. Let me grab them out. All right. So let's say that this pumpkin here, let me turn it around so you just see orange. Let's say that this is Bunker Hill, okay? So these are the Americans. They're originally on the hill. They're up here on the hill. They're the ones up here. Well, the British, remember our green guys, they're coming up the hill. Well, the Americans, they have the vantage point because they can see what's coming up. So they go, pow, get him down. And then here comes, I got some more green. I like toys. I have toys all over the place. They're so useful in class. All right, so here comes another green. Here comes another English man. Pow, get him down. Oops, lost an American. Okay. So as they're coming in, they're shooting them down. They're shooting them down because Americans have the vantage point because they're up here on top of the hill. The problem is that the British have more and more soldiers. So even though the Americans are shooting down these, the British, there's more and more. They keep coming, they keep coming, they keep coming. And the Americans have no choice. They have nowhere to go. So they retreat. They leave. And the British take the hill, and they consider it a victory. Now, when they consider it a victory, after all is said and done, the British lost a ton more people than Americans did. But the Americans retreated because they knew that it was just a losing battle. But we did have the vantage point at Bunker Hill. Okay, next we're going to talk about George Washington crossing the Delaware. Now, this was a really big deal, and it's something we see. This is the famous picture of George Washington crossing the Delaware with the flag flapping behind him and all those kinds of stuff. And this happened on Christmas, December 25th of 1776. He led 2,400 troops across the Delaware River into New Jersey. Now, why he did that is that the Hessians, or were the German soldiers, they were Germans, they were pretty much mercenaries. They were whoever paid them the most money, they were going to go and fight for them. So the British paid them to come and help them fight the Americans. Well, they were over in New Jersey, and George Washington and his guys went across the river secretly, quietly, very on the DL, on the down low, crossed them and went to fight these Hessians. They call them the Hessians, and they were pretty much German mercenaries. The German soldiers, they did not know this was a surprise attack. He got them. They were sleeping. A lot of them were intoxicated. It was Christmas. This was like a really just boom right there, just a surprise attack. And the American troops were able to defeat the Hessians and to defeat them. That not all of them, but to win that battle. And what this did was pretty much the same thing that Lexington and Concord did. It brought forward a lot of respect from other people who were still claiming to be loyalists that said, hey, maybe we should start paying a little bit of attention. And it also caught the attention of France. You see, France absolutely despised Great Britain, especially after the French and Indian War. Well, they were not too keen to join the revolution against the British because they didn't want to get the British angrier at them in the event that the Americans lost. So in their minds, the French thought, well, if we join this war to help the Americans and the Americans end up losing, then we're going to be even in bigger debt to the British than we already are, because they're going to be even madder at us. But if we join the Americans and they defeat the British, then we are on the side of the new friends. We're going to be friends with the Americans, and the British are going down. But so the French were kind of iffy. What should they do? How should they respond? Not only that, but their own people in France were having a lot of difficulty. This is the reign of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. So there's lots of issues going on at home in France for them to deal with, alongside of dealing with what's going on in America. But when Louis had heard about, hey, these Americans are pretty hardcore, he started to pay a little bit more attention. Now, the Battle of Saratoga was fought in October of 1777. So it's about a year after it has pretty much started. And this was in New York. Well, the leader of the American Army at this time was a name that maybe some of you have heard, maybe not, but his name was Benedict Arnold. And he is probably the most famous traitor in all of history. Benedict Arnold started out as a hero, really, at the Battle of Saratoga. It was a huge battle. It was a huge battle for the for the American troops. And some people say that if we never had Benedict Arnold, and if Benedict Arnold wasn't on our side in the very beginning of the American Revolution, then we might have lost, because he was an amazing military strategist. Amazing. The problem is that Benedict Arnold hated the French. He hated the French, and that's why one of the main reasons that he decided to, go against us. So the Battle of Saratoga was a major victory. We had just majorly gotten the British, and one of the reasons that I personally think, and some other historians as well, think that one of the reasons that we did so well here was because the American soldiers were all pumped up. They were like, yeah! They were really, really excited because of what had happened over in crossing the Delaware with the Hessians in New Jersey. So when this battle happened, they were just pumped. They were just ready to go. They were on that victory high, and they were just excited and were able to really use that. And also they had Benedict Arnold, which, like I said, was an amazing military strategist. Well, once the Battle of Saratoga was over, as a result of this, that seeing that the Americans were winning this war, the French decided that they were going to help us. King Louis was no longer kind of like, maybe, I don't know. Now he was like, all right, I can see where this is going. I'm going to go help him. So he sent a bunch of people, including one of the guys was the Marquis de Lafayette, who was an amazing guy that really helped us out a lot. Well, when Benedict Arnold found out that the French were coming to help and that we were going to be receiving French aid and he was going to have to work with France, he didn't like that idea. See, Benedict Arnold was aware of the French and Indian War and had witnessed some really horrible things going on, and he viewed the French as his enemies, and he viewed them as enemies of the colonies because they fought against them in the French and Indian War. Well, George Washington and the rest of the, colonial army told Benedict Arnold to take a seat. And basically said, you need to be quiet, slow your roll. We need their help. And we did. We really needed them, especially their Navy ships. Well, Benedict Arnold got so angry that this was going on that he left the Revolutionary Army. He left the regiment and he joined the British Army. So that is why when we say, I don't know if you guys have ever said it, my mom has said it, I heard it, but I am a weirdo and love history. You Benedict Arnold, if you're, somebody that's a traitor going against them. So that's why they say that. And Benedict Arnold was, like I said before, he was an amazing general and somebody who really helped the American military. Okay, so the French are now helping us. They're sending us ships, they're sending us supplies, they're sending us things that we need. But the main thing that is really a big problem is that our military is not well equipped, to take on the British military, especially the British, Navy or whatever. The British have a ton of people. They've got all kinds of people willing to fight for them. Not only did they have soldiers that were coming from Britain and Ireland and Scotland and all these other places, but they also had a good following that were in America at that time as well. Well, the Revolutionary soldiers that we had were not military trained. They were not career soldiers like these, British soldiers were. So we needed somebody to help us. We needed some serious help. Well, while they were wintering in Valley Forge, and this was time during December through June of 1777 to 1778, it was an extremely difficult time. And what happened there was a lot of suffering and success. It's suffering and success. Some of the suffering was that this was winter. These men had been fighting in the Revolutionary War for a year and a half, and now it was snow deep. It was like, a foot deep of snow. These men did not have the proper clothes. They didn't have the proper equipment. Their feet had turned to frostbite, legs and fingers. They started to starve. There wasn't enough food, so they started to eat their horses. It was a terrible thing. It was an awful situation. The men were really gross. There was no, they wouldn't just go to the bathroom and digging latrines and stuff. They'd go to the bathroom everywhere. So George Washington even put into effect this thing where he said anyone who relieves themselves anywhere near camp was going to get 5 lashes with the whip, because it was so disgusting. People were getting sick just from having human waste all around them. There were dead carcasses, horses. They were eating their dead horses. And in some reports, they were even eating their dead soldiers. They had their hands were turning black with frostbite and breaking off. They had sores and welts. The smallpox started running around. The people were just like skeletons. It was a horrible situation at Valley Forge. And that's why we say it's a lot of suffering. What also happened at Valley Forge when it started to warm up was this guy called Baron von Steuben. That was his name for real, y'all. Baron von Steuben. Friedrich Wilhelm von Steuben. That was his real name. That is the most awesome name ever. Okay, for real. He was obviously a German, and he had come over to help train the American troops. He did, and he was able to do that. With the help from von Steuben, he helped Washington really prepare these soldiers to fight the British. So with the help of the German von Steuben and the Germans, the French help for their ships and for the Marquis de Lafayette, we were able to get our act together to fight the British. Without help, we would have never have won the American Revolution. If we were not helped by the French, because we had, in fact, by the end of the war, we had more French people fighting for us than we had Americans. So if it weren't for the French and the Germans, we would never have won our independence. Never, never, ever, ever. Okay? Well, the Battle of Yorktown was the last major battle of the American Revolution, and it took place in the fall of 1781. We had, like I said, with the Marquis de Lafayette, who led nearly 8,000 French troops, we were able to defeat the British. We were able to, the French ships were able to block the British ships. The French army were able to help us. And with the training given to us through von Steuben, we were able to defeat the British. And it was obvious that they were going to lose this war, because now that the French were helping us, other British enemies were coming to help us. Because remember, like I said, hate is going to hate. Everybody hated Great Britain because they were the number one. They always have hate is going to hate. So when these other enemies of Great Britain had seen what was going on, when they saw that the British were being taken over, or they're, people were going against them, other enemies said, hey, France, hey, America, let me join you too. Hey, let's all join up. So the British decided that they were going to, no choice, they just had to surrender. And the military general for Great Britain at this time was a guy named General Cornwallis. That was the major general. And after the defeat at the Battle of Yorktown, he surrendered to Washington, and pretty much the war was over. Now, the other factors, like I said, that affected the war was that the British soldiers were much better trained than the Americans. The British was considered the strongest navy, and they truly expected this little war to be over quickly. But with the help that we received by the Germans, by the French, by the African American slaves that were over here, by pirates such as Jean Lafitte and his band of merry men and his brothers helping us. We had all of these people helping us win this war. This was not, when we talk about the American Revolution, it wasn't just these colonists who rose up and, defeated the British. It was a group effort. There were women who were helping us. Some women even disguised themselves as men and went and fought on the front lines. Like in this Mulan, the cartoon Mulan. There was actually women who did that in the Revolutionary War. There was, a lot of people that really helped us win this battle and to win this war. There were lots of people. Women and the African slaves really liked the idea that was being, perpetrated here during the Revolution, that all men were created equal. When they heard those words in the Declaration of Independence, they said, well, yeah, all men are created equal, then women and then slaves as well. Well, that comes much later, but they were more than willing to help secure freedom for the colonies and were a great asset, a really great asset in the war. Now, like I said, there were a lot of people who were still loyal to England, and they were called the Loyalists. They were the Loyalists. They really wanted the British to stay in rule. Some of them, in fact, Ben Franklin's son was a Loyalist and had a lot of issues. They even arrested him and threw him in jail for a while his wife died while he was in jail. Benjamin Franklin's, leader of the revolution, one of the big people, that his son's in jail and his daughter-in-law's dead. No joke. Okay, so they're loyal. There were lots of loyalists, lots of people who remained loyal to the British crown. And that created a problem. It really did. The American colonies at this time also were not very rich. They didn't have a lot of money, and especially the money that we did have was British money. So this war is kind of extraordinary. No, not extraordinary, extraordinary that we won, because we had so many things going against us. We really, really did. And it was a lot of problems that, we encountered one after the other. And like I had just said before, even George Washington, G-Dog, our leader, he even thought that at one point this war was not, especially when he was at Valley Forge before von Steuben came and the people were eating their horses and stuff, he truly believed that we were going to lose this war, and he was going to be hanged as a traitor. He really did. So with like the help that we had, we were able to win it. We really were. Another person who helped us was the governor of Louisiana at that time, the Spanish governor. Remember the one that they went to the toilet on his face in their chamber pots, remember? In case you guys forgot, you're like, what is she talking about? Chamber pots were where people would go to the bathroom. That's what they did. They didn't have indoor plumbing. So after the French and Indian War, when France gave New Orleans to Spain, the people in New Orleans were French, and they were not going to have any Spanish person telling them what to do. So the Spanish put a governor in charge. Now, one of the governors was a governor named Eula, and then the other one is a guy named Bernardo de Galvez, okay? Now, he was pretty much a military leader, and he was telling these French people in Louisiana they needed to get their act together because they were like party hard, especially in New Orleans. Y'all think, oh, it's a new thing with Bourbon Street and all that kind of stuff. No. New Orleans has always been party hard, okay? So when Galvez came from Spain over to New Orleans to see all these French people partying hard, the people in Louisiana did not like this guy. They're like, who you think you are telling me what to do? Telling me to go inside at midnight? Telling me all this stuff? Who you think you are? So what the women would do is they would take their chamber pots, like this little, say this is a chamber pot. They would put a picture of Galvez here and Eula here at the bottom, and they go to the bathroom on it. That's what they did. Well, Galvez did help the American Revolution. He was able to really aid us and give us aid of Spain during this war. He defeated the British in several naval battles and was able to regain Florida from the British. So Galvez was a pretty cool guy at this time, even if the people of Louisiana did not like him. Louisiana at this time was not part of the 13 original colonies, so they saw this whole American Revolution thing as something foreign to them because they were considering themselves to be French citizens, even though technically they were Spanish citizens at this time. I know that's so confusing, guys, but that has to do with the French and Indian War. When the French and Indian, remember, going back, ever watch, what show is that? Oh, Saved by the Bell. They always have flashbacks. I don't know if y'all ever watched that show. Saved by the Bell. It was so cool when I was your age. I totally loved Slater. I was Team Slater. Y'all probably don't know anything that I'm talking about. Oh, well. Anyways, so after the French and Indian War, you guys remember, we fought on the side of the British. Well, the French lost the war, and rather than give New Orleans over to the British, they gave it over to their BFFs, Spain, and Spain held on to it for a little while. So New Orleans and that whole area was not controlled by England. Therefore, it was not part of the 13 colonies that were part of the Revolution. They were technically Spanish because they were controlled by Spain. However, it was always in the works. It was always with France and King Louis, and that they were really, really French citizens because that's just the way they were. Because Spain was pretty much not really, they was doing whatever France said. Anyways, going back. So the Treaty of Paris officially ended the American Revolution. Now, there's two Treaty of Parises, the one that ended the French and Indian War and the one that ended this one. This one is called the Treaty of Paris of 1783. That date is important because it distinguishes the first Treaty of Paris from this Treaty of Paris. And like I said, they always name these treaties after where they are signed. So if the treaty was signed in good old Chalmette, Louisiana, down into Paris, where I'm from, It would have been the Treaty of Chalmette. But because it was signed in Paris, it was the Treaty of Paris. The Great Britain officially recognized the American independence, and the two countries agreed on new boundaries. So under the terms of the treaty, Great Britain still controlled Canada, and that's why there's British Columbia and all that still in Canada. And the United States controlled the land south of Canada, east of the Mississippi, and north of Florida. So we had, this is like before the whole Louisiana Purchase, we were able to maintain the original 13 colonies and then a little bit more. And as the years progress with the Louisiana Purchase, we are able to get even more land, but not before the War of 1812 and all of that good stuff. So, well, excuse me, I am lying here. The War of 1812 came after the Louisiana Purchase, excuse me. So we're going to continue on with that. So please make sure that you review all the information you have just received. Go over your guided notes before you take the assessment. Please, guys, it is one and done. I can't explain that any more clearly to you. I will see you guys next Monday with a whole new slew of Miss Meyer shows. Enjoy your weekend. See you guys soon. Bye.